Being in Istanbul, I have devoted some time to the problem, and it was also a major part of my speech to the Turkish Association for Education Research, with 700 people down in Çanakkale, close to Gallipoli, where the battle was between Mustafa Kemal, who became Kemal Atatürk, the father of all Turks, and Winston Churchill, that relic from the 19th century. But we don't have to go into that, we just have to take note that Turkey is now approaching a period of centennials, of glory of Gallipoli, and the trauma of the end of the Ottoman Empire, the end of the Caliphate, and the beginning of the Turkish Republic. But the Turkish Republic was based on secularism in an overwhelming Muslim, Sunni Muslim country, and it became a dictatorship. The present political party in power, AK Party, Justice Party, overcame that with absolute brilliant politics, moving it from a military secular dictatorship to a civilian Islamic Sunni democracy. Now that is not an easy job, and there are contradictions in it. These contradictions are now coming up. And any society has its contradictions, and one of them is in the center of Istanbul, the Gezi Park, Taksim Square complex. Very important, Gezi means promenade in Turkish. It's a beautiful park. It's the only one in that part of Istanbul. Green lungs, beautiful trees, and trees are witnesses to history and live organisms. The park brings us back to a nature, domesticated, yes, with no dangers around, no wild animals, advantages to parks, and are like a balsam for our souls. So you can say to any regime of whatever political color, be careful with parks. So up came AKP with a project, and the project affects the square and the park. It's a big project, a huge one, and it means the end to the park, essentially. And in the project is an opera house, a mosque, a big mall for business, residences, and a memorial to the Ottoman Empire, the so-called artillery barracks. Now, all of these, if you will, 5 components, in a city with 14 million inhabitants, are blessings to the city. If you have had a transition from military rule to religious intellectual to business, business is certainly running big in Turkey, and a mall is a logical part of it, but not at the expense of a park. So May 27 was the first demonstration, understand a quite small one. And these were people of the hugging trees variety, if you will, known from the West. But Taksim Square was also important, because that was the place of the martyrs who were killed in the 1st of May 1977 demonstrations against the then military regime. In other words, Taksim Square carries history, and the park carries nature. Now, if you want to, quote-unquote, develop that, you're killing a part of history and you're killing a part of nature. Regimes of all kinds, be careful. Be careful with parks, be careful with history. So what can be said is that the AKP probably was a victim of their own success. Up came unilateral decisions, and they started demolishing what to many people were sacred. The opposition party no doubt made use of it in order to relaunch itself. And there were provocateurs, as usual, who saw a chance of making use of violence, the only language they understood. And the police made their vengeance in kind with excessive amount of tear gas, so excessive that the Prime Minister Erdogan, the G is silent in Turkish, it's Erdogan, deplored and regretted the use of violence, but was totally unwilling to discuss with the other side. No discussion, no dialogue. Now, that's arrogance. That is becoming a victim of one's own success and developing the idea that I'm infallible and my ideas are equally infallible. Look at the success we've had. And at this time something else also happened, you see. Turkey has had a very successful policy of zero problems with its neighbors. It has neighbors. But that policy has changed relative to Syria. When it comes to Syria, Turkey has taken a stand against the regime, Alawite, and in favor of the opposition. Nobody knows exactly the composition of that opposition. It's very diverse, very fragmented. They may have a common enemy, the current Assad dictatorship, minority dictatorship. And the majority is absolutely clearly Sunni, no doubt about that. And the other minorities are afraid of a Sunni majority dictatorship. The choice between two dictatorships is an ugly one. And you have fighting going on, and very few people coming up with anything that could be a solution. But there's a second point to Syria. And that's the third bridge. So the second point is that the first point is that Turkey has taken sides, and even militarily seems to be arguing or moving in favor of moving in violently with others against the regime. They have reasons. But if you want regime change, the method is an election. Monitored, fair and free election, FAFE, that's the method. Not overthrowing it, including from the outside. It will never work. Having said that, there's a second aspect, and that's the third bridge over the Bosphorus. I remember when I was first time in Istanbul, there was no bridge at all, there was a charming ferry. I was actually driving from Oslo to Calcutta, a little drive of 12,500 kilometers, and that ferry was the transition from Europe to Asia. Now you do that in 5 minutes, crossing the bridge, and the third bridge is now coming. 14 million inhabitants. The question is the name of the bridge. So President Gül and Prime Minister Erdogan sat down together and came up with a name. And the name is Sultan Samuel I, whose particular nickname is the Ferocious. Now, he's reputed to have killed 45,000 Alawites, Alevis. We remember that the regime in Syria is a regime of Alevis, an Alawite regime. That Sultan adopted Sunni Islam as the Islam for Turkey. Now, by honoring him with an important bridge, you are sending a signal, but that signal is not only pro-Sunni, it's also anti-Alevi. I said reputed to have killed 45,000. There are discussions about that. I mean, no doubt how Syria reads the message. This is not a good time to issue that kind of message. I wish they could reconsider it. So then you ask, what is the solution to all of this? And the solution is called dialogue. And the condition for dialogue is, point one, empathy. That you are willing to see that the other side may have an argument, and that you are not infallible having the only argument. And you know, there are two arguments here. One, respect nature. For heaven's sake, let us have the park. And the other argument is, be careful with history. There are glories, there are traumas. History is ambiguous. Maybe you have to put attention to both. You may glorify the Ottoman Empire by putting the so-called artillery barracks up high, but be aware of the fact that they were victims of the Ottoman Empire. They were ruled for 500 years, so almost 500. 400. From the beginning of 1500 to the beginning of 1900. It's a long period. Of course, the uprising against it was engineered by England and France, Sykes-Picot, 1915-16. But it was also genuine. It was Sunni, and it was by and large Sunni over Sunni countries. Now, having said that, the Ottoman Empire may be a period of glory for many Turks and a period of trauma for many others. So be careful. One way of being careful is to pay attention to both aspects. I mentioned now harmony in the sense of seeing it from the other side. And how about cooperation? Well, the cooperation is called dialogue, searching for a solution. Now, what would the solution look like? I'm not the one to pronounce that or anything of the kind, but I can give an example. You have a park. You want to have a mall. Put the mall underground. You can just dig under the park and put it there. Exit from Kyoto Station in Kyoto. You find an enormous mall immediately underground. Travel to the city of Alcoy in the province of Alicante in Spain. They had a square corresponding to the Taksim Square, with a very, very important procession taking place each year in January. Don't have to go into details, but that was a part of the historical ownership of that town. Up came the idea of a mall. Well, the mall is there underground. You just walk down some steps and there it is. And the square is untouched. Now look, we have technology in order to do such things. And technology opens for possibilities. Okay, how about the mosque and the opera house and the residences? Can be put somewhere else. How about the artillery barracks? Maybe in the park. Maybe there. Honor history. But do it in such a way that you also pay attention to the victims of the Ottoman Empire. Maybe you invite them to participate in the construction bit. In other words, have a worldwide ranging dialogue. Well, you see, Turkey was stuck in military dictatorship, got unstuck due to the AKP people. I mentioned two of them by name. The third one, the Deputy Prime Minister. The fourth one, Davutoglu, the Foreign Minister. I have enormous admiration for what they did, catapulting Turkey in a position similar to Finland. In a position from having been very low down to being a meeting place, a place above the conflicts of others, coming up with solutions. Today Turkey is stuck again. And is stuck again, I would say, to a large extent because of the unwillingness of the Prime Minister to have a real dialogue. I hope that will change.
To have a real dialogue with the people?
Precisely. With people of all kinds. Many of them are actually his own voters. In other words, understand that democracy is not something that happens every 4 years, electing a majority. It's an ongoing process every hour of the day, our dialogue.
So this is what you mean when you say that the AKP has become a victim of its own success?
Precisely. It's understandable. It happens to very, very many in politics. It happened, for instance, to Winston Churchill. He didn't understand that new things were coming up. And in came the Labour Party. It happened to the Labour Party, who didn't understand that new things were coming up. In came Margaret Thatcher. It happened to Margaret Thatcher, who didn't understand that new things were coming up. And as they say about the Iron Lady in Britain right now, rust in peace. I hope Turkey will get unstuck again.